Part 66. After my death, the villain blackened again. Author, Ben Gong Weipang. Chapter 656. Between the pits that this guy dug for her yesterday, Yan Ji had no patience for Su Fang, waiting for his fake crying to finish, and then he asked impatiently, "Get off without talking." Su Fang, a shocked spirit, immediately knelt down and screamed his words, "Your Majesty, as soon as Xining goes, the mountains are high and the water is long, and I would never see His Majesty. His Majesty should write a few words for His Majesty. When it's time, you can take it out and look at it to understand Acacia." Yanj stared at him sneer. Su Fang was thick-skinned and murmured, "Your Majesty, as long as you agree to the minister, this time the minister will go to Xining to help your Majesty see if there is a good-looking man, and then he will secretly send it to the palace." Yan Song lifted his feet on his shoulders and turned the person to the ground, "Go." However, in the end he also wrote 4 words to Su Fang, "Takako was born early." Su Fang looked at those words, and the crying face looked a little bit this time. In a month, Yanj deliberately found a man in the capital and took the pulse. And not pregnant. It seems Nalan Mo's situation is really difficult to get her pregnant. Just when Yanj was searching and looking for a suitable candidate, Nalan Mo himself found it again. In the palace's dragon boat dinner, Nalan Mo sat next to her. This guy may be a little red because of drinking. In the field, the sound of silk and bamboo was swaying, and the hustle and bustle of songs and dances. Nalan Moyeo toasted to the song, "Your Majesty, the last time His Majesty borrowed a book from the minister has finished reading." Yan Ji had long forgotten about Nalan Mo using a little yellow book a month ago, and the surrounding sound was so noisy. She didn't listen to Nalan Mo's meaning at all, and the words echoed, "Oh, look, it's good to be done. It's also great for Ai Ching to read more books." Nalan Mo was silent, and he tilted his head slightly, staring at Yan Ji's face. Because of this guy's difficult son, Yanj was cold to him. When he saw him staring at him, he smiled slightly at him, and was immediately distracted by the singing and dancing in the field. Prime Minister Nalan Mu drunk too much tonight. The emperor's graciousness made the drunken officials stay in the palace, and naturally, there was also Nalan Mo. Sleeping in the middle of the night, the window was choked a few times, and then pushed open. Qin Gong's helpless and desperate probe shouted to the interior room, Your Majesty, forgive sins. It is really the Lord Prime Minister that he is drunk and runs away and can't stop him." The drunk officials were arranged in other palaces, and only Prime Minister Nalan Mo rested at the side of Yan Qin's Kinzen Hall. Yan Ji got up and put on a coat, and when he saw the father of Qin Gong pulling Na Lan Mo's clothes, he was so scared that he was about to cry, but Na Lan Mo continued to crawl into the window. Today's Juyanj deliberately changed into a sip of the champion, and every official has a little on his side who has been instructed beforehand to remember what the officials said after being drunk. Yan Ji leaned on the window lattice and looked at Na Lan Mo, who was struggling to climb the window, and asked Qin Gong casually, "What did the Prime Minister say when he was drunk?" Qin Gong's face was white, and he didn't say it outright, only took the small book in his arms and gave it to Yanj. Yan Ji waved his hand and motioned him to retreat. Nalan Mo also ran into the window with his hands and feet at this time. Yanj closed the window, and Nalan Mo, who squinted and fluttered, stepped on her couch and lay down straight. Although the footsteps flutter, the movement can be called smooth. After my death, the villain blackened again. Author, Ben Gong Weipang. Chapter 657. Yan Song walked over and took a look. After the man was drunk, his clothes were neat, and even his hair was meticulous. He was lying on the couch with his legs folded, his hands folded on his belly, and his eyes were pale. His eyes were closed, as if falling asleep. This guy was very weak, and Yanj was covering his bed with thin sheets. "Help him, Quilt, just want to pull hands." Nalan Mo grabbed her hand. Yan Song raised his eyebrows and looked up, only to realize that this guy's eyes were open. A pair of deep, bottomless eyes, now staring at her unflinchingly. It's like trying to see through her nature. Yan Song looked back at him quietly and calmly. For a long time, he blinked, "Your Majesty." Long and thick eyelashes flutter, adding a little cuteness. For the first time, Yanj found out that the man had very long eyelashes. She hummed, "Huh." Nalan Mo's lips froze, and a slight red flush suddenly appeared on her face. "Your Majesty, where is the woman of that day? Where is she?" He grasped Yanj's hand tightly, and raised his head slightly, a pair of eyes moisturizing Yanj expectantly. I miss her." Words of song. Ya didn't even have the energy to do anything. She dared to think about women. This was a good girl who would delay others. She leaned down slightly and poked Naranmo's eyes with her finger. "You are the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister has the power and power, what do you want a woman to do, not to mention that you are such a weak chicken, is auntie a woman married to you? A woman is here, and I'll take care of Zhongshan. I'll have a son in the future. I'll recognize you as a son." After that, he reached out and touched Nalan Mo's head to appease him. Nalan Mo was silent, and he pursed his lips, staring stubbornly at Yan Song. I wonder if she understood her words. Thinking of having a sip of the sip and completely fragmenting it, Yan Ji guessed that Nalan Mo's condition was similar to that day. She stretched out her hand and pressed his shoulder. "Sleep, be good." Nalan Mo suddenly lifted his upper body, looked up and pulled out the jade of Yanj's head. Mo Fa poured down and landed on his face. He caught a strand of hair in his hand and sniffed at the tip of his nose. The next moment, he pulled Yan Ji on the couch and pressed it under him. Word song? Most of the drunk men do not have that function. The mighty one belongs to a different type of talent. Yan Song did not resist. She happened to be pregnant. Of course, the meat is mainly to the mouth. However, she was hugged by Nalan Mo upon her couch. The guy held her in one hand, covered the two with a quilt, and then touched her head. The voice was soft, "Sleep." Words of song. The woman who is the Prime Minister really has to stay alive. The chicken sighed, "This time, the mighty man is not even fully functional in this area. This is still a natural darling. It is really terrible. Even a small child is still incomplete. Why is there such a darling? Do it." Zhu Wei returned to it. "Heavenly beloved is still good. Even the unparalleled beauty like Miss Sister would want to sleep with him. If I can choose, I would like to be the same. Even if I can only sleep with my sister, it will be very happy and content." The chicken rolled his eyes. "Look at you." After a pause, he said, "The young lady you are yelling at may not be a male with countless killers. Don't sleep when you don't. She'll sleep as a fox with her eyes narrowed." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After my death, the villain blackened again. Author, Ben Gong Wei Pang. Chapter 658. Nine-tailed, you slander and rumor your sister, and you don't deserve to be your back. Chicken, I'll be a shield and kill you now. Yan Ji listened to the quarrel between these two guys, without any drowsiness. It's about taking medicine all the year round. There is a light smell of medicine on the man around him. He puts his hand on her shoulder, making her stick to him tightly. The whole brain is smelling from him. It's all in this situation, and he doesn't sleep for a while, but he can't explain it a little. This time without medicine, take a supplement. It should not cause much damage to his body. Yanj is not a tangled person, just do it. Immediately blocked the geeky system, got up and took a bath again, and looked into the mirror again, putting a beautiful makeup on his face. Then he went back to the couch, and turned to Nalan Mo's clothes. Okay, after drinking, just try it out. Probably because there was no peony and was anesthetized by alcohol, compared with the last time, like a wolf like tiger, this time Nalan Mo responded very little, and the whole song was under control. Do not have to bear the pain of breaking the melon last time, Yanj, this time to eat as much as you want to eat, as long as you want to come slowly, come here, a rare taste of the fun. She crawled on the man and even had the illusion that she rushed into the sky. However, before she thought about it, the man beneath her suddenly opened her eyes and glared at her. His eyes were clear and energetic, and he was clearly no longer drunk. The words were stunned. He grabbed Yanj's shoulder with one hand, sat up, and pressed him back to him. Who are you? The sound is clear. It's no different from him in the chapel on weekdays. After the song was a little aggressive, tears popped into his eyes, and his eyes blinked a little, and the tears rolled down on his face. Sorry, please, please don't tell your majesty, I. She twitched and was at a loss, and the coldness on Nalan Mo's face gradually became soft and helpless, and she pressed her shoulder's hand to release her strength. Don't cry. He reached out and wiped the tears on her face. She suddenly pushed him hard, pushed him to the bed, pulled his white robe over her body, and ran towards the door. Yanj took Nalan Mo's robe, Nalan Mo slippery, even if he wanted to chase, he was ashamed to go to the ground. He wrapped himself in a quilt and whispered to her, don't run, I have no other meaning, I. Yanji heard his voice and stopped at the door. She turned her head, looked at him, and said beggingly, today, can you tell your majesty? Nalan Mo stared at her stern brow and almost nodded subconsciously, I don't tell anyone. Who are you? Yanji dropped her head slightly, her eyelashes trembled, and she wrapped her clothes tightly. She said again, I'm sorry. Seeing that she was about to turn around again, Nalan Mo said quickly, wait, last time, wasn't you last time, you? He hadn't finished talking yet, the song had opened the door, and the night wind blew in. The lining of her that belonged to Nalan Mo was lifted by the wind, and her slender white tender legs were more eye-catching than that of the white robe. For a moment, Nalan Mo even thought that the woman standing at the door was a fairy and was about to return from the wind. He ran towards the ground with a quilt, and immediately chased her. Wait. But with a blink of an eye, the doorway was empty and no one was there. After my death, the villain blackened again. Author, Ben Gong Wei Pang. Chapter 659. The door was swaying by the wind. Nalan Mo approached the door. Where was her figure? Who is she? Back in the room, Lan Mo realized that he was in the room of the Emperor's Kinzen Hall. Why is he here again? There was no trace of the Emperor in the room. Theoretically, there should be a palace person on duty in the Kinzen Palace. How could a woman run in? Where did the Emperor go again? There were traces left after he and the woman had enjoyed themselves. He was sitting on the couch wrapped in a quilt. The quilt was like the fragrance of a woman. He sniffed gently, and then buried his head in the quilt. When it was just dawn, Qin Gong came in lightly, and as soon as he lifted his eyes, he saw the Lord Prince sitting on the couch wrapped in a quilt. At first glance, he thought it was a monk chanting. The sound of his footsteps was already low enough, but when the adult looked at him, his eyes narrowed and opened, which scared him enough. Gong Qin, where did you go? What am I doing here? Father Qin busily came forward and said, you drunk climbed the window and ran into your majesty's room. Your majesty was afraid that you would close the window when he was cold. To rest in another room. President Qin, there is one more thing that needs to trouble you. My clothes are wrinkled and not easy to wear. Can you go to the Nalan house carriage in front of the palace door to find my set of clothes? Qin Gong nodded in a hurry, it's okay. After a pause, he said, "Your Majesty just told the slave that you would step on the quilt when you sleep, so let the slave come and see, Your Majesty really cares for the adult." Nalan Mo said His Majesty's sympathy and honor is a blessing to the world community. The hand under his quilt was shaking slightly. "It's really not a dream." "Who is that woman?" When Grandpa Chin withdrew, Nalan Mao was afraid that the woman's clothes would fall into the inner room, and the emperor would find out that they had found all the corners, but found no clothes. Could it be that she came naked? As soon as this idea came out, he suddenly felt that he was right. My heart is so shameless to this kind of self, but still can't help thinking about her again. It turned out not to be a dream. When she left, he asked him not to tell the emperor about it, so she must have anything to do with the emperor. Could she be the woman of the emperor? But there is no woman in the emperor's harem, and the whole court knows things. Qin Gong was very careful, and a whole set of clothes inside and out brought Nalan Mo to him. Nalan Mo did not return to the Prime Minister's house for the first time afterwards. The remote side door of his palace personally met the father-in-law who had always passed on the message to the Prime Minister's house and asked about the Emperor's harem woman. There is no woman in Her Majesty's harem. However, Her Majesty brought back a woman from the outside more than a month ago, but the woman rarely went out of the temple door, and the door was calculated, and the douyi was worn on her head. For so long, Your Majesty has never been to the woman's place. Everyone is curious, but they have never seen the true face of the woman, don't know what it looks like, and Your Majesty does not spoil her. Everyone has forgotten such a person. More than a month ago. Time is right. Nalan Mo felt his heart beating. He wants to see her. He must find a chance to see her again. After my death, the villain blackened again. Author, Ben Gong Weipang. Chapter 660. After a few days like this, after realizing that the emperor didn't seem to notice it, Nalan Mo found a chance for the little in the palace to send her a letter. Originally thinking that the letter would sink into the sea, she did not expect that she would ask him to meet at the back door of the Prime Minister's house. There are a few words in the envelope, but the handwriting is vigorous and strong, not like a woman's Zhuangzi typeface. With the letter in his hand, he always felt that the writing was familiar. After staring at it for a long time, suddenly, as if remembering something, he got up and went straight to the study, and opened the book the emperor had borrowed from him last time. The words "Return to the garden" on the cover are clearly the same as those on the letter she gave him. He squeezed her letter and froze slightly. Is this back to garden her handwriting? And she can, out of the house? Nalan Mo didn't know whether the letter was true or false, and whether the person who came to the back door of the Prime Minister's house was really her. But he did not want to miss this opportunity at all. So on the day of the appointment, he didn't even go to the early morning, always waiting at the back door. I'm afraid someone will scare her. He even ordered the stay to keep idlers from entering and exiting the back door, and his people lurked outside the back door. Once someone came in and out, he immediately blocked it. I was afraid she would be afraid to retreat when she saw someone. The wait is long. From a young age, Nalan Mo didn't find time so difficult. Even if he had been lying on a sickbed, he could have a good pastime. However, on this day, his heart has been in the midst of a trance, and he can't even believe that this is the word of Nalan Mo, which is a word of caution. It is already a sunny day. At noon, even the ants are not willing to appear in the sun, and some water on the ground will evaporate. He waited in the value room at the door. Even if the little room was iced, he was sweating all over. People around him persuaded him to leave a few times, but he sat there, staring at him without blinking. There was no intention to leave the window. Maybe she'd be here the moment he left. His idea finally came true. In the sight of her eyes, she wore a black skirt, and the long black veil falling from the bucket almost covered most of her body. I can't see her features and don't argue her face. But she came to the back door gracefully and gracefully. The moment she appeared from the street corner, he could confirm at a glance that it was her. Is her. He got up sharply and rushed out. But when he reached the threshold, he slowed down and resumed his calmness and calmness. When she came to the door, he just stepped over the threshold of the back door, stood there and smiled warmly at her. Girl. He reached out and made a hand gesture, but instead of walking forward, she put her hand in his palm. So much mental preparation he had made for himself collapsed at this moment, pinching her hand, and his heart was pounding at this moment. She didn't even dare to look at her. If nothing happened, she walked in with her hand. He heard her say softly, "My name is Guan Yu, you can call me Yu Yu." The word Yu was tossed many times in his heart, and he was pinched in his mouth and wrapped around the tip of his tongue. Although he didn't yell out, he went back and forth thousands of times and has been called by him numerous times. It turned out that her name was Guan Yu. What a nice name. Her fingers were tender and slender, and as cool as jade. His palms were hot, and she held her hands, as if that hot heart had gradually stabilized. He asked her, "Is it from the palace?" You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After my death, the villain blackened again. Author, Ben Gong Wei Pang. Chapter 661. Yan Song bowed his head. Yes, your majesty has a token that gives me free access to the palace gate. She talked softly and chuckled, are you okay? He also wanted to hear her talk about the relationship with the emperor, but she had already turned her head, and his heart fluttered, and he couldn't even tell what the emotion was. Very good. Last time you were in a coma, I was so scared that I didn't dare to see you for a long time. Hearing your majesty said that your blood was lost. I think it was too much that day and I always wanted to say sorry to you. Naranmo. Is he losing blood? Is he losing blood? What does she mean? Does that mean he can't do that? He clenched her hand subconsciously. Loss of blood. Yanj seemed to be unaware of the danger in his words, and said with a smile, yeah, your majesty is distressed, saying that you are ill, and a lot of things have been piled up for him to deal with. He wonders why a person like you can lose blood and blood. I suspect you have countless beauties in Fuzhong, and be a groom every night. Nalan Mo, this emperor, how did he think about him? However, her voice was clear and vivid. When she smiled and spoke, it sounded like a jingling wind bell. In his mind, she became her voice again and again. Her voice is really nice. She shook his hand. Are there any beauties in your house? He busy said, none of them. After a pause, he whispered, my soulful beauty is by my side at this moment. There is no one but this one. She giggled, and the laughter was so brisk, it was as if he had made a funny joke. The next moment, she wrapped her arms around his neck, her face closer to him. She also had a bucket on her face, and a thin black veil was stuck on her face, and also on his face. Through a layer of black veil, he collided with her gaze. She stomped her feet, her lips slowly moving up and touching his lips. The black gauze was rough, but her lips were soft and moist. His hand was involuntarily pressed against the back of her head, and even if she could not touch it deeply, he didn't want her to leave. Master, she whispered softly, I'm afraid of the sun. Is there a sedan chair? When talking like this, her lips were on his lips, like feathers flicking, itching and tingling, making his thirst really worse. He has never been a lover of beauty, nor is he a man who will be dominated by women. But from the moment she saw her, all his thoughts seemed to be affected by her. There was only her left in her eyes. Still she took a step back and kept his distance, and he said, yes. He is not well, and wherever he goes, the sedan follows. He shouted around the seemingly nobody, Yang Lu. As soon as the words came down, 4 people immediately carried a soft car and walked out under the shade of a tree. Yanj took Nalanmo's hand and walked towards the sedan chair, opening the car curtain and whispering to him, "This car is very spacious." We squeezed it together. The 4 bearers were used to Nalanmo, although they all looked down as if they were rooted in wood. They could not help but be surprised when they heard the words. Adults have a clean habit from small to large. Because of his weak body, all his utensils have been washed numerous times. This woman's words are really bold. They thought that the Lord would refuse. Unexpectedly, they're high-ranking adults, they whispered, "Okay. After my death, the villain blackened again." Author, Ben Gong Weipang. Chapter 662. The sedan is indeed spacious, but it is a bit crowded for 2 people. Yan Ji squeezed beside Nalanmo, slightly tilted his head, and gave him the back of his head, "Help me to untie the knot of the bucket." When Xiang Nephrite was around, all Nalanmo's thoughts were drifting. Everything is impractical, giving him the illusion of dreaming. But he knew it clearly. This is not a dream. She is not a dream either. He trembled his fingers and helped her open the knot behind the bucket. Fingers will inevitably touch her smooth neck, the warmth of her neck is like a fire, and his fingertips are numb and crisp. This kind of thing has never been done before, and is more and more busy. She urged him, "Why is it so slow? It's simple." True, it's simple, but he just can't control his hands. Her voice was so nice, in the small space, it seemed to be the sweet fragrance of her body, which was a faint ink fragrance. She must be a woman who likes to read and write. Did she write the Return to the Garden? Thinking of the pale white swaying words in Return to the Garden, thinking of the beautiful pictures, his heart began to jump uncontrollably. Suddenly, her hand was held on his third leg across the clothing. Why is it so prominent here suddenly? Duya untied at this time, he helped her to remove Duya, missing a layer of black gauze. Her eyes widened and staring at him looked simple and naive. But the corners of his eyes were slightly raised, shy and charming, and the corners of his eyes were like his gossip. His throat rolled and he didn't respond. All thoughts seemed to be concentrated in his belly, and she was tightly squeezed into her hands. She turned around, sat on his lap, bowed her head, and kissed his lips. Lips and teeth are entangled, her lips are soft, and her juice is sweet and fragrant. No moment can make him feel the deliciousness of her lips so clearly. He wondered, the first few times, it was really only a dream. But when his gesture tightened, she broke off his lips, she held his cheeks with her hands, her face was no closer than his face, and even her nose seemed to touch the tip of his nose. "Sir, do you want it?" She whispered softly, whispering in his lips, something that only the 2 of them had heard. The soft but weak voice made him feel helpless. You. He hadn't finished his words yet. She kissed his lips again, and her hands were unfastening his pants. Until she sat at him, he was still stunned, unable to pull himself away from this dreamlike thought. Hands clung to her ignorantly, holding her tightly and tightly in her arms. Kissing the tip of her nose, kissing her lips, burying her head in her chest. Sir, her voice was soft and low. It sounds more pleasing than when she laughs. He wished she had been screaming in his ear for so long. The sedan chair was walking, and the sedan chair dangled leisurely. The people in the sedan also wobbled. With his hands around his neck, he hangs on him softly and lazily, with his eyes blurred and delicate, and his face is rosy, as if the flowers that have absorbed the moisture are blooming in trembling. She winks like silk, he is wrapped around him. "Master, you won't pass out, will you?" He pursed his lips, didn't speak, and held her in his lap, making it harder and harder. She couldn't bear it anymore, and her teeth bit his ear bead, and her thin voice weakly exclaimed, be careful, be careful." "Sorry, dog blood, no way, spring is here, I can't control myself, oh yes, See you tomorrow. After my death, the villain blackened again. Author, Ben Gongwei Pang. Chapter 663. The word Shenzi was called out by her, just like two of the best syllables in the world. He squeezed her tighter, and with that strength, she was almost inlaid into her flesh and her throat rolled. He seduced in her ear with a dumb voice, a few more calls. The path that the sedan chair traveled can almost turn the entire Prime Minister's house twice. Everyone knows the movement inside the sedan chair. I was amazed at the fact that the high-ranking minister in his own house would not do it if he did not do it. The first thing he did was, "Can't wait to turn into roots." The courtyard of the Prime Minister's house Nalanmo is a forbidden area. No one can step in without permission, and the bearers are turning here. There are two people in the sedan chair. Although they are not heavy, they can move around for so long, and the iron beaters can't stand it. The footworkers gradually slow down, and their bodies are sweating like rain. They didn't expect that their adults were so physically fit. Just as everyone's footsteps were drifting, the voice of the magistrate finally came from the sedan chair, "Take the sedan chair to the door of the study, and you will step back." The bearers were relieved. The sedan chair stopped at the entrance of the study. After a long time, Nalan Mo, who was neatly dressed, hugged the woman in her arms and came out of the sedan, walking towards the study. The woman's face was covered by a dipper, and the babies at the door of the study all bowed their heads, and in the corner of their eyes, they saw a black skirt hanging down by the woman, and nothing else was seen. Holding the song on the couch in his study room, Nalan Mo leaned down slightly and looked at the song from a high position. He nodded on Yan Ji's body, unbuttoned her blouse, and touched every inch of her skin. The eyes are foolish, as if looking at an excellent piece of porcelain. Yan Ji held his head in one hand, squinted slightly, and watched Nalan Mo's hand lingering on her. "Ask him, does it look good?" This woman was not a little bit shy, and even asked so boldly that he didn't look good. "She's like this, isn't it?" But he liked her voice so much, and even liked her tenderness and pride when she asked questions. "It looks good," he said. "It looks good." She leaned slightly to the side, crawling on the bed, revealing a smooth and graceful back. "Sir, I heard that you are good at dancing, especially Red Plum in the Snow, and the painting is excellent. I have the honor to let you on my back draw a picture." Nalan Mo's fingers touched her back, swam slowly from top to bottom, and eventually fell between her legs. "Call me carefully." The corners of her eyes were as charming as dripping water. "Thanks for holding him," her voice sounded like a kind, "be careful." He was not interested in painting. He pushed his fingers slightly, leaned down, and the whole person was attached to her. This afternoon, he was painting on her back. The red plum in the snow, extending from her groin, has been in full bloom on her shoulders, and her white tender back is blooming such a tree of red plums, beautiful. When he was painting, she was lying there, looking at a book in his study. From time to time, he looked up at her side face, and she didn't speak. The quiet features of the five senses. At this moment, the scenery made him have the illusion of quiet years. He paused, his thoughts repeated over and over again, eventually unable to suppress, and asked her softly, "Your Majesty treats you unusually. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." After my death, the villain blackened again. Author, Ben Gongwei Pang. Chapter 664. The words of the song murmured hum vaguely, as if going to sleep. Nalan Mo listened as she continued to speak, but she did not continue. His lips clenched tightly, and his heart suddenly became extremely irritable, and he was thinking about the relationship between her and the emperor. After waiting for him to think about how to organize the language, she finally spoke. "I sold calligraphy and painting in the alleys of Beijing, and my Majesty watched the calligraphy and painting and brought me into the palace. Your Majesty likes me. On the first night, I wanted to follow those actions in calligraphy and painting and do those things. But I didn't agree. I put medicine in his tea. Your Majesty said, as long as I'm pregnant, I'll be named queen. I really want to be a queen, but I don't like to do that kind of thing with your Majesty. Sir, can you say that I can conceive your child? My Majesty still remembers his promise after conceiving a child. She talked a few words, like a gossip, sighing, listening to her voice. You can imagine in her mind the slightly worried expression on her face. He was choked all over, as if split by thunder, his heart was split into countless petals. He imagined the reasons she was with him countless times. For example, she had seen him secretly, and fell in love with him at first sight, so she had two people's spring dreams. However, at this moment, she was very frankly saying that she came to him because she wanted to conceive his child and then become the emperor's queen. The paint on his hands was accidentally knocked over by him. She turned her head and looked at him in surprise. Master, what's wrong? This floor paint splashed on the ground countlessly, just like his heart. He looked at her, and asked in a deep voice, are you with me just to have a child and become the emperor's queen? Word by word, the word is very clear and very quiet, but only he knows that his heart is shaking at this moment, and the waves of anger are piled up in his heart, and he will soon break out of the bank. She blinked and answered without hesitation, yeah. The fluttering words seemed as if they didn't think it was a thing. Confronting his unbelievable gaze, she added, I don't like doing such intimate things with the emperor. I don't like his appearance. I like you better. How can there be such a woman in this world? Doesn't she have a bit of moral politeness and shame? Doesn't she find it problematic to do this? And the men around her, one is an emperor of a country that she can ask for, and the other is a prime minister with countless powers of life and death. Wouldn't she be afraid to anger him? Would she kill her? He was so angry that he gasped and laughed. He got up and got down on the couch. He stood in front of her. You're so sure that I will do what you want? Yanj reached out and pulled his clothes. His voice was still soft, tender, and innocent. I don't know, so I only secretly liked you in the beginning. She blinked her eyes and asked him puzzled, are you unwilling? Her watery eyes were clear in black and white, without a little guilt or sadness, and innocent. He was so angry that he couldn't vent, just felt that he was ridiculous. If you don't want to, I won't look for you in the future. She pursed her lips, seemingly aggrieved. Yanj, for the sake of being a showman, I even did a cuckold to myself. I really feel wronged. Chicken, how do you feel like you are enjoying it? After my death, the villain blackened again. Author, Ben Gong Wei Pang. Chapter 666. Without waiting for Nalan Mo to respond, Yanj glared at him, and continued, but you have to finish painting the plum blossoms on my back. Anyway, this kind of thing is a loss for me. You don't know that night, I will give you medicine much more, you are as crazy as a wolf. For the first time, I was treated so fiercely by you. After the blood shed a lot, I was scared to think that I was going to die. She had been sympathetic, but she said briskly, you should draw the plum blossoms on my back because of my bloodshed. It turned out that he was prescribed medicine the first night. That's the emperor's dormitory. That's where the emperor lives? How dare she? How could she be so bold? He stared at her. She didn't have half anxiety or complicated emotions between her brows, and she smiled as if she never knew human anxiety. She said such complicated things, and there was almost no entanglement. His clenched lips finally moved, and he asked her without question, Your Majesty, where did the night go? He didn't even know how he could be so calm. Obviously he felt that he would strangle her, but his fists were clenched, but he was just motionless. Your Majesty drank the tea I brought him, and fell asleep on the bed behind the screen. She didn't think she had any questions in this answer. Your Majesty said he was happy with me, and he thought about me day and night, and he gave me the brand. I can walk freely in the palace. After a pause, she also said, Your Majesty is very simple, thinking about Zhongshan Shi, staying with me, and just like those paintings I paint, want to do with me, and also want to imitate those poses on the painting. I don't like him. She landed, walked up to the mirror with a naked body, and looked at the red plum behind her. Sir, you still have one that you haven't finished painting. He bowed his head and stared at his hand. Hands are shaking. The emperor of a country was even drugged by a woman. Such a woman is not enough to die. He fluttered angrily, but his eyes fell on her. Those angers became frustrated internally. He heard his already calm voice, the paint was destroyed and he could no longer paint. She made a pity and pulled up the clothes hanging down from the waist. Sir, I'm a bit hungry, can I eat something before I leave? Can. Thank you. He smiled brightly at her, and squeezed his hand slowly. He walked to the door and summoned Xiao Xiao to ask a few words, and then turned back to the study room. She stood by the bookshelf, stomped curiously, and looked at the books on the bookshelf. When she heard his footsteps, she couldn't turn her head, and continued, Sir, did you just want to kill me? He thought she knew nothing about the world, but she didn't think about it. She observed the details, even the thoughts that flashed through him at that time. My lord, my life is complicated, and I can't say a word. I didn't believe in love since I was a kid. The love between you and me is something you want and I shouldn't use it that way at the beginning. If you kill me, I have no complaints. She still looked down at the book in her hand. Her voice was soft, and her cheekbones remained clear. She said a few words and spoke lightly, but the second time was not my intention. It was you who held me and wanted to hold me. Take the bed, you take the initiative once, I take the initiative once, we are too clear. If you want to kill me because of this matter, I will disdain in my heart.